This is Building Tomorrow, the Society of Construction Law Australia podcast.
On the show, you'll hear real conversations about what matters most to the people behind the scenes who are shaping Australian construction.
From lawyers and contract administrators to engineers, commercial managers, consultants, and all the other experts forging the future of Australian infrastructure today. I'm Mawona Matanda.
I'm BJ Lomsal.
And I'm Jennifer Raphael.
Today, we're chatting with Salam Al-Mulla, who has led delivery of Melbourne's flagship infrastructure programs, including the Melbourne Airport Rail, early works, level crossing removal, and now the Suburban Rail Loop. Salam brings hands-on site leadership experience. He blends practical knowledge, contract know-how with a passion for improving workplace well-being as part of the Wellness in Infrastructure initiative. In this episode, Salam will share his insights into delivering major projects based on his experiences, the practical challenges of applying contracts day to day, and how to keep teams aligned with contractual obligations. He also discusses his involvement with Wellness in Infrastructure and the positive effects of wellness initiatives for project teams. Let's jump in. Welcome to the show, Salam.
Thanks for having me, BJ.
Could you please introduce yourself to our listeners about your career background and where you are now?
Absolutely, BJ. So looking at the history of my career, most people don't know I'm actually a mechanical engineer by background. And I started within the industry over 15 years ago. And I cut my teeth on a well-known project known as the Victorian Desalination Project, which was extremely challenging, but also extremely rewarding. And then I made the decision to go and lead Melbourne Airport Rail initial and early works, which was my first real leadership role where I was responsible for the whole project. And that was a great experience. Following that led me to my current role, which was the Suburban Rail Loop initial and early works project. And that has been a great and rewarding experience for the infrastructure that we are delivering for the people of Victoria.
Absolutely. Now, before we get to wellness in infrastructure and why that's so valuable for people in construction industry like yourself and me, well, let's go firstly to, being an engineer, right? Let's touch on what makes us get to that point such that we need organizations like Wellness in Infrastructure. It wasn't probably just born out of, hey, let's make one. There was a need, I think, to have a community like that where we can have a shared belief system and share our experiences and support each other, right? Now, let's start with something to do with practical contract management, right?
Yep.
You're an engineer, I'm an engineer. Do you see contract management as a fundamental skill for engineers, or is it more like an extension of their roles as it evolves? Because going through uni, I did one project management subject. Yeah, that was great, but absolutely nothing on contractual obligations. How important is contractual literacy for engineers?
Now, that's a great question, BJ. And to me personally, as I've sort of evolved and grown into more leadership positions, I find it extremely important and required for engineers to be contractually literate because it really informs the decision making, which is what we do every day as engineers. We're deciding on how a project is heading, what we're delivering, what scope. I think it allows us to define responsibilities, manage risks, manage expectations, not just for us as the contractor, but also for the clients. And that's extremely important. I think one thing that's important is it's not just about the legal clauses. It's about understanding how they apply to decisions being made on site. And, I look at three key things which stand out to me in terms of applying contract knowledge on site. And the first one is about being clear on your scope and your change management. We obviously agree that at the start and we go to deliver a project, things always change. We need to adapt and be clear on how we are managing that change, because I think that's absolutely crucial. Secondly, maintaining records. I think that's really important, not just for the client, but also for the contractors, for engineers to be keeping records, because things do evolve. As I said, change management is a huge thing in our industry. And probably the last thing and most important thing for me is ensuring we continue to promote a collaborative mindset. It's not just a contract and we have to administer it. Obviously, we have to administer it to the letter, but it's about using the contract, it's not about winning an argument. It's about how are we being fair? How are we facilitating the contract? How are we being transparent in our delivery? And that goes back to the collaboration piece, because it's so important that we collaborate with all parties involved in order to achieve the desired outcome, which is a common goal for everyone, ultimately.
Absolutely. I can remember very clearly in one of my meetings with the project manager in a past project where they mentioned the contract exists so that everybody can protect their interests and that everybody should win. If somebody is coming to an unfair conclusion and because of the way the contracts are operating, then, it's probably not quite the best outcome or the intended outcome for that matter. So absolutely, I think being clear on scope, maintaining records, and I might add contemporaneously, not 6 months after when you've done something and you're trying to figure it out. And then again, ensuring collaborative culture in your team is absolutely useful. You've had about 15 years in your industry and probably a bit more now. How do you think this contractual literacy has evolved? Do you think it has certainly jumped from a point when you were, let's say, delivering projects in your early career and then had to have this massive learning curve when you had to step into leadership? Or did you have an opportunity to, grow that in the same manner as your career has grown?
No, that's a great question, Vijay. And I look at the experience I've had, because I can't obviously talk for anyone else, but as a site engineer, you're sort of focused on your scope. You're focused on delivering the work that has been tasked to you. And depending on your leadership and your mentors and how much they get you involved and how much they explain your contractual obligations, that's the exposure that you get. As a site engineer, I was focused on the task, didn't get really involved in the contractual legal piece. But the more I evolved in my career, probably around late project engineer, senior project engineer level, that's when you needed to be aware of the contract, not just the model, but also the implications of your decisions on the contract and what outcome it's going to have, not only for your organization, but for the client. So that was a big shift for me going through that. And I think now that we're tending towards more collaborative contracts, it's very important for engineers to be aware, and the team in general, not just engineers, all disciplines that work within your team, to be aware of your contractual requirements, obligations, so that you can deliver what you promised and deliver on your promise. So that's extremely important for me. As you get into more leadership roles, which is where I am at the moment, you've got to be across the whole thing, obviously. And going back to my previous statement, having the right mentor, having the right leaders that educate their teams is critical for delivering successful infrastructure projects.
That's great to hear. And for you in your projects right now, how actively are you applying these learnings with your team? I had some chance to apply this well early in my career as a site engineer. I used to call myself a micro project manager for a simpler word. Are you also applying these principles actively for your team as part of your culture? We are focusing strictly on commercial things here because it is a Society of Construction Law Australia podcast, and being engineers, technical discussions are always exciting, but we're focusing slightly differently here. So, it gets the spotlight here today, but so be it.
Again, I guess for me, the key is education. And you got to remember that engineers have so much on their plate in terms of what they're delivering, the technical you spoke about. So you don't want to bombard them with, here's a contract, read it start to finish and make sure you understand it. It's about picking out the key things that are going to be relevant to their roles and important to the decision making, as well as the impact it could have on a project. So from that perspective, it's really about being mindful. Okay, I need to educate the team on the contract, what we need to deliver, what we need to ensure we uphold throughout the delivery, and being specific on what you're educating your team on. And that's what I aim to do in all the projects that I'm involved in going forward.
Now, contract literacy is all well and good. You study university and then you come up with different formula to do so many different calculations, and they largely stay the same. Let's say they might get a bit more complex. But contract models, they change. Even very likely in your career as well, the desal plant was probably not quite the same contract model as what you're working now. And in between them, you've had multiple different contract model delivery experiences, whether you like it or not, right? It's the way the industry shifts. Would you be able to share with me the different types of contract models that you've had experiences in, just as your contractual introduction of what are the different types of contracts you've worked with?
Yeah, definitely, BJ. I look back at the desal, which was a PVP, and, throughout my career, jumping into majority of my career, I spent my time, across 6 or 7 level crossings, and they were all alliances. So alliancing was very strong in Victoria from about 2013, 2014 up until even now. All the level crossings are alliances. And then shifting to Melbourne Airport Rail, SRL, which are MCAs. So every contract has its different requirements, challenges. I think for me, it's about being adaptive and understanding what the requirements are so that you can deliver on them. And I go back to my previous statement about delivering on our promises. I think that's the key. A contract is set up so that all parties deliver on their promises. And if we understand it, and if our team understands what we need to deliver and what the contract states, then we can deliver a project far more successfully, not just for ourselves, but for our clients.
Absolutely. Obligations and entitlements is how I like to remember these things. As we go as citizens, rights and duties, we all have to do our part, and we are also entitled to what we are entitled to as well. All of these different types of experiences, projects, new teams, constantly changing, always having a new face on site. I mean, in my experience, you would have, let's say, a drilling contractor today, and then you'd have, again, a hammering contractor another day. You'd have a haulage contractor. Everybody is just a new person, and you're constantly just having to build new relationships, work long hours, which is not a surprise at all. One of our recent episodes, we were talking about Kevin Porter. He highlighted well and truly about the pressures that exist in the construction industry as general. And every project you go to, there are different teams, there are different joint ventures from different companies, and you just really need to be able to gel with people to get to that one common goal of delivering the job on time, under budget, and potentially keeping everybody happy as well. But that's not always achievable. There are different pressures in life, personal, academic, career, all of those different things. How does it relate to you? And we want to connect this to wellness in infrastructure, right? So we want to relate this personal experience that we have in construction projects and take it to our next discussion point of wellness in infrastructure.
I guess when I think back at my career and the projects I've been involved in and construction in general, you're absolutely right. High pressure, long hours. You feel like you always need to deliver, so you end up pushing yourself and pushing things around you, either, putting your health to the side, putting your family to the side, which is a big problem we see in the industry. I've always, even as a site engineer, you always have to stay back or come in early because that's what we need to do to deliver on the project. And you're seeing it at varying levels based on the project that you work on. And level crossings in particular, fantastic projects, great experiences, but very high pressure, particularly with occupations where, some days you do 12, 14, 16-hour days. I remember there was weeks I would do 80 to 90 hours in the week, and you'd end up working weekends and night shifts. And that pressure is so immense on the whole team. And it sort of goes back to the piece about culture and how you set up that culture, how you set up the balance within a project, which is extremely important. And this is what leads to wellness infrastructure, where we sort of observed there was a lot of pressure in the industry and something needed to be done. And I'd love to delve into that a bit more with you as well, BJ.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's introduce this initiative, Wellness in Infrastructure, that you have been involved in for some time now, 8 years, which if I backtrack, was sometime when you were just finishing level crossings, the first time when you left level crossings. And occupation, I'd like to touch on that a little bit. I mean, when I first learned about occupation, because I'm from a civil engineering background without any real experience, I was mind blown with the level of detail that you need to prepare to get to the occupation. I mean, you need almost a line by line, hour by hour. The public doesn't like the trains being late. And if you've got an occupation, well, for the listeners out there, an occupation is when, I'll try my best to explain, but basically the train services will be disrupted and people will be working in the rail corridor for a certain period of well-defined time, and they'll be out of there. So let's say in an usual night, you might start at 8 o'clock and then you'll have to be out by 3 a.m. or something so that the trains can start running at 5. So it's not like, oh, hey, I'm 5 minutes late, give me 5 more minutes. It's by the hour. So the pressure is immense. It's not like, oh, that one's a bit late, we'll get to that later. So I absolutely understand. So let's introduce wellness in infrastructure.
Thanks, Vijay. I look back at the Caulfield to Dandenong level crossing removal project, which I was involved in, and we built one of Australia's first straddle carriers and applied it in the corridor, which was fantastic, like such an engineering feat and marvel. And I was very passionate and I loved working on that project, but it was very high pressure. And this is going back 2018. One of my colleagues, or 2017, he reached out to me and said, look, I know you're under a lot of pressure. The team's under a lot of pressure. There's an initiative happening in the background called Wellness and Infrastructure, and they're conducting a survey on engineers and white-collar workforce. And would you like to be part of that? So I said, yes, I'd love to. And I got involved, was part of the survey, was part of the working group that we established at the time. And that's what really got me involved in wellness infrastructure. And, you know, the organisation itself was established in 2018 following the research of Professor Luke Downey, who ran this survey, and it revealed some alarming statistics. And construction is one of the highest pressure industries across our country. And, you know, we noticed some of the respondents, 85% of the respondents were experiencing moderate to high stress. 46% were meeting burnout criteria, which is ridiculous. And depression, anxiety, stress levels exceeded our population norms by 60%. So to sit around and accept these statistics is just not right. So something needed to be done. And wellness and infrastructure was formed. And we hear all these statistics, you know, 190 Australians in construction taking their own lives, suicide. Something needs to be done. And this is what wellness infrastructure aims to do, is to improve mental health and wellbeing within our infrastructure construction industry through a number of initiatives that we've tried to develop over the years. And I'd love to get to those in a bit of detail with you.
Absolutely. I've had a bit of a squeeze myself with some of the initiatives, being one of the followers of this program. I see you've got some mentoring programs as well, some psychological analysis tools, and then you've also got ability to go out to, let's say, teams within organizations and provide the leaders with the, I wouldn't say equipment, well, the mental toolkit, let's say, or things that they need to be able to deliver on that agenda of improving wellness. So talk to us a little bit more about some of those key initiatives that you are part of in this wellness in infrastructure.
Absolutely, BJ. So some of the initiatives that we've already developed, implemented, which you've already touched on, the mentoring program, for example, which I was specifically involved in. So that was the Resilience Mentoring Program. This is in 2023. So going back 2 years, essentially we chose 10 mentees and 10 mentors from different organizations and cross-pollinated them just so they get different experiences from different organizations. And the whole purpose of this program was to address the high pressure, high anxiety in our industry and understand what the baseline level was. So we conducted a survey at the start of the mentoring program. We set up structured sessions between the mentees and the mentors, and then we did a follow-up survey to understand what the results were. And the results were significant. We look at mentees, and levels of depression and anxiety were 86% were in the norm, which is fantastic. And this is compared to the baseline results. You know, stress levels, 72% in the norm. Obviously, we're still going to have some stress within our industry, but they've reduced significantly. Burnout levels dropped by 11% as a result of this program. And individuals who were part of the mentees in particular that were working more than 60 hours a week reduced that down from 20% to 14%. So there's clearly a shift. And that's what we aim to do with a program like this, which we release to the wider community. And I look at what we aim to do at Wellness Infrastructure is not just to release programs, but we're trying to have a cultural shift and a lasting shift. And we're trying to support organizations to do the same so that they can implement these initiatives across their organizations and projects. If our teams are happy and our people are happy, we're going to be delivering more successful projects, and our teams are going to want to come to work, and we're going to see the construction industry flourish, not just see people wanting to leave the industry because it is too high pressure and wanting to look elsewhere for a different career.
Absolutely. It is tough going out there with especially the long amount of hours. And yeah, it's definitely good to have this ability to be in a mentoring program. I say that because I'm also part of the mentoring program with the Society of Construction Law Australia, where you get paired up with somebody else who's a little bit further in their career. And in terms of the structure, they've got a slightly different structure, but the concept is the same. If you can see somebody else as an inspirational person to some extent, and you can draw life experience out of them, because a lot of times you can study books, you can pay to go to uni, or you can learn at work, but what's coming ahead of you, no one knows the future. So I think that's one of the very nice ways to predict the future. Where could I go? Where has this person gone? And is this the path I want to follow? So that's absolutely amazing. And I see there's a lot of research work that Wellness and Infrastructure do as well, given that you were initially part of you were approached as part of a research project, and then that was in 2018.
Correct.
And I can see that there's been new reports published as well, one particularly in 2023 as well. How does the research work within Wellness and Infrastructure? And talk to us a bit more about this whole aspect of your organization.
I look at some of the key things that we've delivered this year, and I'll touch on that first, which is very exciting because 2025 has been a huge year for us. And then I'll touch on the survey, especially the comparison between the 2018 and 2023. So, this year alone, we've employed our first employee. Last year, 2024, we were officially registered with the ACNC, which is as a non-for-profit charity organisation. And we've now expanded not only within Victoria, but we're in New South Wales, ACT and Queensland. So we've got working groups in all those areas as well. We launched our website. So if anyone's interested, which I'll touch on, www.wellnessii.org. So anyone who wants to get involved, wants to support us, volunteer, please feel free to do so. And we also hosted our first major event, which was the inaugural International Women's Day mentoring morning tea. And then also the start of this month, we held our first awards night, which was a huge success. We had over 200 leaders in a room to celebrate the individuals and the projects and the organizations who are really driving mental health, well-being within the workplace. And that was a huge night for us to sort of recognize that we are getting support and we do see a shift culturally within the industry. So this has been a huge year, very exciting. Going back to your previous question about the follow-up survey, which was not unexpected. And the reason I say that is we were hoping for an improvement in the results from the 2018 because of the work that we have been doing, but it wasn't as a significant shift that we'd expected. So I look at some of the statistics here. Average levels of depression and anxiety and stress exceeded population norms by 60%, 70% for anxiety, and then 50% for stress. So we're still seeing high numbers. Looking at females reported greater levels of satisfaction with work-life balance, but still had elevated levels of stress compared to their male counterparts. Younger staff members, and this goes back to occupations level crossings, which I touched on, and that's 25 to 29 years, reported reduced work-life balance. So we're still seeing significant challenges within our industry, and this is why we exist, because we are trying to change this and make our industry more sustainable. And having that survey comparison from 2018 to 2023 really sort of shine the light on the issue, which is still out there, and which is why we're driving a lot of these initiatives. And I'll touch on some of those as well, what we're planning on doing moving forward. And I think you touched on at the start of this session in terms of the psychosocial audit tool. That is one of our key focuses, where we're actually rolling that out across 8 different projects at the moment. And what that does is essentially assist organizations and projects in complying with WorkSafe psychosocial requirements and how they're being managed across the projects. We're doing a lot of other initiatives in terms of the working groups, working on releasing a new mentoring program known as the Emperor Resilience Mentoring Program. So that's going to hopefully kick off in the next 3 to 6 months. we've relaunched the Executive Advisory Committee, which I am co-chair of, and very proud of the leadership team on that Executive Advisory Committee, because we're essentially the bridge between the board and the working group, and we're trying to drive strategies from all organisations and their leaders. So having senior leaders, if it's from organisations or even Engineers Australia, ACA, so everyone's supportive of this cause, which is great to see that we are having this backing, and everyone within our industry is keen to make a shift moving forward.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to understand a bit more about who makes up wellness in infrastructure. Now, Society of Construction Law Australia, we've got a lot of lawyers and expert witnesses in our membership, and that's one aspect of who we are. And within wellness and infrastructure, I know, let's say, Rebecca Dixon, one of my acquaintances, she is involved with SOCLA as well to some extent, and she's also associated with wellness and infrastructure. I'd like to know a bit more about who makes this wellness and infrastructure.
Yeah, no problem, BJ. So in terms of our, I guess you could say, structure, we've got a board, and Rebecca's the chair of the board, and she's been absolutely fantastic in driving the organisation. As I said to you, this year, 2025 has been a huge year for us. Before that, we had Jill Hennessy, which also did a fantastic job and really supported our initiative. We've got a board of 8 at the moment, and they range between commercial managers, engineers, consultants. So, I won't list every single person. That is the board, and that's our structure, but it really does show a spread of different disciplines across our industry. It's not just engineers or managers. Then you've got our operations manager, who we've hired this year. So she's been integral in driving a lot of these initiatives, the awards nights, the board meetings, our executive advisory committee, which is co-chaired by myself and Nicole Neal. That is, we do quarterly meetings, and then we have our working groups, which is really, for me, the heart and soul of wellness infrastructure. It's the volunteers, and we're all volunteers, but they're the volunteers that are doing the grunt work and driving these initiatives, setting up the psychosocial audit tools. And that's chaired by Emily Travaskis across Victoria and Campbell Warren in New South Wales. And we see that structure has been working really well for us, because I go back to my previous point. It's not just engineers or management. It's a broad range of different disciplines that are involved, and they've all had involvement in the infrastructure construction industry. So it just makes sense to have that diversity across our organisation.
Definitely. I take your point on cross disciplines and multi-hierarchy. So different people in their different stages of the career, and then across different disciplines. That really helps to bring out a wide conversation, whereas one person might have one view on a particular matter and the other person has a completely different view. We won't go into the examples per se of what might discussions be like, but this psychosocial analysis tool sounds a bit interesting to me of its purpose and how you are running it at the moment. So I think you tied it to WorkSafe. Is that WorkSafe you mean, as the organization?
Correct.
And so they have been involved in providing input to how you have created this tool. Is that correct? Or it's the other way around?
So it's the other way around. So WorkSafe obviously has requirements and, I guess, guidelines and what is expected of employers in the workplace to comply with psychosocial safety moving forward now. So as an initiative that Wellness Infrastructure has developed, this psychosocial audit tool supports WorkSafe's goal of creating positive mental health workplaces. And what we aim to do with the psychosocial audit tool, also known as PAT, is organizations and projects can evaluate how they are complying with the guidelines. And essentially, it's a self-audit tool which helps identify your strengths, where your areas of improvement are, provide you with valuable insights on strategic planning, what initiatives you've got already in place, what initiatives you could implement to better strengthen your psychosocial well-being within your project and your team.
All right. Now, how can others get involved? I mean, we've heard a lot about what does wellness in infrastructure do and all of the brilliant initiatives. I definitely like the psychosocial tool you've just mentioned, Pat. But how can we get involved?
No, that's a great question, Vijay. And funny enough, I've had a lot of people reach out to me personally on LinkedIn, seeing the stuff we're putting out there. And I love that passion that people just reach out and say, I love what you're doing. How can we get involved? How can we help make our industry a better place? And not just temporarily, it's a lasting change and a lasting shift that we're trying to create. So what I'd urge organizations and individuals, if they are keen to get involved, jump on the website, wellnessii.org.au, and just click on the contact us button. Fill out your details. We'll reach out. You can get involved in the working group. You can get involved in the smallest or largest way possible. Whatever time you've got, anyone can support and contribute. In terms of involvement within your own projects, I think it's really about not just getting involved in wellness and infrastructure in general, but making those changes across your projects. This is what I urge people to do. Be brave and lead by example. If you're going to make a change, make it within your organization, make it within your project, and then support wellness and infrastructure at the same time. So this is what I urge people out there to do if they are wanting to get involved. And I'd love to see what we can achieve in the next 2, 3, 4 years with our industry, because I love this industry and I've been part of this industry for a long time, and I want to see it flourish, and I want to see people staying here. I don't want them to go into other industries, and I want to see projects to be successful, because if our people are happy, they're mentally fit, they're healthy, they look after themselves, our projects are going to be more successful, more productive, and we're going to continue to deliver strong infrastructure projects, not just for the state of Victoria, but Australia in general.
Very well said and very inspirational, Salam. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me, BJ, and I look forward to the next one.
Thanks for listening to Building Tomorrow, the Society of Construction Law Australia podcast.
The Society of Construction Law Australia is a national organisation of members at all stages of their professional career with a shared interest in construction law.
For more info about the Society of Construction Law Australia, head to the website scl.org.au. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Sound Cartel.
To make sure you don't miss an episode of Building Tomorrow, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app.
And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Mawuna Matanda.
I'm Bijay Lamsal.
And I'm Jennifer Raphael. And we'll see you in the next episode of Building Tomorrow.